Hey everyone, and welcome to today's lesson on subcultural theories of crime. Still under functionalism, okay, and building on the work in particular of Merton. So if you haven't done Merton's lesson, the lesson on Merton strain theory, pop back and get that one done first, because it won't make much sense to do today's lesson unless you've done that one. So it's still a functionist theory. It's the fourth of four. And by the end of the lesson, I'd like you to be able to explain how belonging to certain subcultures may lead to crime and deviance. I haven't put a task as such on this piece of work, so you probably want to make some notes as you go along, pause, hang fire, hold the PowerPoint, hold the video, and make your notes as you go along. So what is a subcultural theory? We're looking today at the work of Albert Cohen. So it's important you know it's Albert Cohen. Often you'll see in the book A. Cohen, because later in the topic we look at Stan Cohen's work as well. So two Cohens in Crime and Deviance. So it's just worth knowing that there are two and they're not the same person. And for subcultures, it's Albert Cohen. And Albert Cohen was a functionist who also was looking at crime and deviance and was writing at the same sort of time as Merton. And he didn't necessarily agree with what Merton said in the strain theory that we looked at last lesson. He thought, you know, pretty decent job, Rob, you've done okay, but he felt that there were some bits missing. Cohen felt that Merton's theory of his 4 types of rule breakers explained lots of crimes. So it explained things like theft. So that's your innovators, people who want to achieve the goals. They want wealth and power, and they'll steal to get there. He even managed to explain things like drug use, where you reject the values of society and reject the means of achieving them. And your goal aims to be to get your fix, your drug fix, and your means of achieving it is to get the drugs. So he said, yeah, you've done a good job of explaining many types of crime. However, it doesn't explain crimes such as vandalism or joyriding. So joyriding is where people steal cars, not with the intention of owning them or selling them, but to just drive them around and crash them or dump them. Crimes that don't have a profit, that don't have any natural gain to them, what we might call a non-utilitarian crime in sociology. And Cohen said that you're not explaining, Merton, these types of crimes. And Cohen said that what we need to do in order to understand those types of crimes is look at the groups committing them, because he felt that it was more of a group response, i.e. a subculture, that were getting involved in this type of crime. And that's where his subcultural theory came from. So reminding you of what a subculture is, we did this on education, so I'm hoping it rings some bells. A subculture is a culture within a culture, a smaller group within society. So a peer group that share their own kind of ideas and values would be a subculture. You guys are all probably part of various different subcultures. Things like football supporters are a subculture. They have their own norms and values. You wear your football shirt to matches. You sing certain songs. You maybe go to certain pubs on the way. All that kind of stuff. You have your own norms and values. Yes, you will share many of the mainstream norms and values of society, but you will have your own particular norms and values that show your identity as part of that group. Now, not all subcultures are deviant or criminal by any stretch of the imagination. They might be, but most are not. Most people with a hobby are part of a subculture. So things like train spotters have their own subculture. Skateboarders have their own little subculture, where maybe there are rules over what you wear, what music you listen to, what your interests are, how you speak, words you use, etc. And Cohen said that we need to look at certain subcultures to understand certain types of crime. Cohen used this idea and particularly looked at delinquent working class boys. Now, delinquent just means troublemakers. It means people who are getting into trouble, who are doing things that are wrong, basically that are a bit naughty, a bit of tearaway. And so he looked at working class boys who were frequently getting into trouble. And what he found was that their subculture, their peer group, the people around them, were incredibly important to them. And these groups developed their own norms and values. He said that on the whole, they did share the norms and values of mainstream society. Cohen is a functionalist in its broadest sense. He believes in value consensus, he believes in socialization, and he believes that we are mainly brought up with the values of society. And he said that these boys were no different. They wanted to do well. They started off life wanting to get success and get a job and get wealth and get money. But he said that they very quickly found that their opportunities were blocked. They were working class boys, and for various reasons, cultural material deprivation, think back to education, their opportunities were blocked. But he found a different conclusion compared to that of Merton. So where Merton said that what these boys might have done is started stealing, for example, to get the wealth, to get the fancy trainers, to get the fancy phone, these boys took a different path. And Cohen phrased their experience as suffering from status frustration. And status, remember, all the way back to the start of year 10, status is your position, how much power you feel you have, how much say you feel you have. And these boys, Cohen argued, didn't get much status. Usually we achieve our status through doing well in school, getting good jobs, etc. And these boys knew that that wasn't going to be for them. They knew that their opportunities were blocked. And this led them to feel very frustrated. It led them to want to sort of kick back at society, to kick out, because they're not going to be able to achieve in the normal way. How does this then lead to crime and deviance? Well, Cohen said that what these groups then do is develop their own norms and values that do allow them to succeed. So we talked a little bit about this in education, and we talked particularly about those boys who form those anti-school subcultures. So groups in school where there are boys who kind of maybe know that they're not going to do as well as others. They know that perhaps they're not the cleverest in the class, the work doesn't come easiest to them. They get their status then from messing about. They become the class clown. They become the cool one. They become whatever it is that gets them some sort of recognition from their friends and from their peers that's anything other than doing the work. So if you think back to what we talked about with anti-school subcultures, these groups, and Cohen did look particularly at boys, play up to each other in order to get some sort of status, to get their sense of pride and to get their sense of fulfillment and recognition. They do this in a deviant way. And this is where that crime of vandalism and joyriding comes from, that these boys are getting a thrill. They're showing that mates that they're cool, I say that in inverted commas, that they're brave, that they're prepared to take risks, and that gets them a sense of status that they can't achieve by doing well in school or work or the more conventional ways. It's worth now having a look at some of the criticisms of functionism, because these are your really useful AO3 kind of points. Firstly, we can criticise functionism because they assume that most crime is committed by working class males. Many working class males don't commit crime. So it's unfair to say that being working class or being a male, being young is going to, cause you to commit crime. There are lots of young working class males who don't commit crime. And functionism tends to have quite a narrow view. They don't look at female crime, for example. They don't look at middle class crime. And that's the next point. Marxists would say, well, hang on a minute, there are specific types of crime called white collar crime. More on this when we do Marxism later on. There are specific crimes committed by the middle and upper classes, and we're not looking at that because functionists only want to focus on working class crime, and Marxists would say that they're a bit narrow-minded. They also assume that there's value consensus. Okay, so they make an assumption that we're all socialized into these norms and values. Well, we could question that, couldn't we? In lots of different ways. Some people don't get great socialization, but also society is very diverse. We live in what some people might call a postmodern society, which means that there's lots of different opinions, different views, and isn't society a bit too diverse to say that there's a value consensus? And then this guy Matza, he's worth having a look at if you're pushing for those top grades, maybe get a bit more info on him. He said that it's not as simple as the way that functionists have kind of explained it. People might drift. He called his study was called Delinquency and Drift. They might drift into crime and deviance when they're younger. He said it's sometimes often a phase that young people go through, but it doesn't mean that they're part of a subculture for the rest of their life or that they will lead a deviant criminal life forever. That it's something that people drift in and out of at various stages of their life, and it's not necessarily something that you're permanently socialized into. And he says that functionists are what we would call a bit too deterministic, that we push people into boxes, metaphorically, I hope, and it doesn't have to always be that way. He also talked about techniques of neutralization, quite a topical thing if you've been watching the news lately. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, that when people do the wrong thing or do break the law, we automatically make excuses, and therefore people don't necessarily see themselves as deviant or criminal, and it shapes their view on things. So things like, I was drunk when I had that fight with that person, or I was protecting my family when I broke the law and did the wrong thing. And that means that people maybe drift in and out. They can excuse some sort of wrongdoing and therefore move forward and sort of think about things in different ways. Only task I'd like you to do today, and so hopefully you've got a few notes there on subcultural theory. The main thing I'd like you to do is to do this table. So pause it here, copy out the table, give yourself plenty of room. I've just had to make it that size to fit on. But go over the last few lessons on functionism and just make sure that it all makes sense. So the 4 main functionist causes of crime. Who are the key people and the key studies? What are the main points in that study? Bullet points are absolutely fine. This is just a summary. You should also already have the notes. And then that last column is not specific evaluations of the 4 things, but just those functionist things that I've just talked about in general. What are some of the issues with functionism? And that should bring us to the end of functionism and crime. On the next slide is your challenge for today. So, couple of websites on there. I'll put them on the show my homework link so that you've got them there to click on if you're watching on YouTube. Find out about sociology of risk taking, EdWork, it's called sometimes. 2 sociologists, they don't work together, they work separately, Katz and Ling. Have a read, see what you can find. According to their ideas, why do people commit crime? And do you agree, and explain your view? And I've already mentioned postmodernism, but I've put a little definition there at the bottom because they're kind of postmodern theorists. So you might find reference to a concept called postmodernism. This is a view that the society we live in now is very diverse and separate. There is no one way of doing things or viewing the world anymore. So postmodernists don't like functionism and Marxism and feminism because they think of them as too narrow, and they say that we can't see the world in such narrow terms anymore. Things are too different because of technology and the internet and travel and stuff like that. So have a look and send it in with your work. Please don't forget to upload everything you've done. Can't wait to see what you find out.